Welcome to M&A Mondays, the UK's first YouTube series dedicated to all things M&A. From interviews with the leading figures in the industry, to coffee chats with analysts, diversity panels, all the way through to workshops, we'll be covering it all. We do hope you enjoyed the video, and please give us a like and a follow on our social media. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of M&A Mondays, the UK's first YouTube series dedicated to all things M&A. My name is Aemilia Baker and I'm the co-head of the UCL M&A group, and I'm joined here by Nikola, our head of speaker relations.
Today with us we have Laura Marsh, who is an assistant director at Natrium Capital. She's a specialist chemical industry M&A advisor with a considerable experience of supporting company management teams throughout the whole deal process. Laura has worked on acquisitions and disposals for both strategic and private equity clients, including complex cross-border transactions. Laura also studied at UCL and holds a first-class master's degree in chemistry. So without further ado, let's get started with the questions.
So Laura, given your background in chemistry, there are many options for the careers you could pursue. What was it that drew you to a career in the financial services industry and in particular M&A?
So, I really enjoyed studying chemistry. I did it for 4 years. So, but I never really saw myself working in a lab or doing a PhD. So I wanted to find a way that I could use it, but with a bit of a different angle. And I'd always preferred the more inorganic and material side of chemistry, as well as the mathematical side. So I wanted to keep part of that. And what I started thinking about was the more practical applications of chemistry. So how it's used, what it goes into, and the companies that do that. And then in my first year, I did an internship with Aviva. So that sort of opened my thinking to finance, and I started to think of what are the ways that I can put this together. Either do I look at working in a company that works with chemicals, or what do I do? And M&A was something that I came across, and it just seemed to really tick the box as a way of being able to combine the chemistry and the finance side that I was interested in.
Now, after you did the summer internship at Natrium Capital and you joined as a full-time analyst, you've been at Natrium for over 5 years now. What is it about the firm that kept you in it?
So obviously I enjoyed it because I came back and haven't left. So what we do day to day is just really varied. And I think that's what's really probably kept me there for, I think it's almost 6 years now. We work with a mixture of clients, we work on various projects, and whilst it's all within the chemical space, that's really broad. So I think that variety has something that's really kept me excited and engaged at Natrium over the last number of years. And what I also really like is that we're a specialist chemicals M&A group. There's not that many out there. While some of the bigger banks have specialist chemicals teams, there are much fewer of the chemical specialist groups. And so we're really focused in on having scientific backgrounds. Everyone in our team has that chemicals or science-related background that gives us a really specific angle on deals and understanding, and really being able to get into the nuts and bolts rather than just having surface level understanding. So I think that's been a really, really key part of it. And also working in smaller boutique has given me much more exposure to deals at an earlier stage. So even when I started as an analyst, I was getting much more deal exposure at an early stage, which I think that's what people get into M&A for. That's the interesting stuff. That's the exciting stuff. And so I think that's also what's kept me around for a long time, is just really getting into the deals, and that's what I love.
Thank you for that. That sounds really interesting, actually. I wish I decided to study chemistry instead. So yeah, just to follow up, you have advised both on sell side and buy side transactions. Out of all of them, which have you found more interesting, and how do they actually differ? Could you explain us that a bit?
Sure. So maybe starting with sell sides, I think with these you work from the client start to end. So you really get to see the whole deal process, starting with how you position the business, maybe with carving it out, with identifying buyers, approaching them, and running the process all the way through, managing the due diligence, and then getting it to sign and close. So you really get the whole part of a sale process. On the other side, with a buy side, these can really depend on where you get brought in on the process. So sometimes you might have something that looks very similar to a buy side, where you start at a very early stage with a client, maybe identifying a target. You might preempt a process and approach the seller. Or at the other end, you may get brought on at a much later stage. Just often what we find is that people bring us in for our specialist expertise on chemicals, so really helping them understand what's going on with the asset that they're looking at. And so it can really depend. It can be really short and sharp on a buy side, or it can be really drawn out because you're much less in control of the process because you're not the one in charge of the timeline. So I think those are the main differences. And in terms of which ones I found more interesting, it's a real mix. And I think they each have their own exciting bits. And on the sell side, I love the fact that you can really get involved with everything and you really help shape the process. Whereas on the buy side, you can have these really short, sharp, intense bits of work. And then if you're not the winner, that just stops, which in itself is an interesting one to get your head around. But then if you do win that process, then obviously you get to work for a bit longer and working with the client to get it through to closing. So they're both got their own interesting different parts, I'd say.
Sure, thank you. And so I'm a chemical engineering student myself, so I'm really interested to see if you have any advice for STEM students, or in particular chemistry or chemical engineering students, for breaking into M&A and how we can kind of leverage that background to help us.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, we've actually got 2 chemical engineers in our team, and the rest are chemists. So we focus specifically on looking to hire people with chemistry, chemical engineer, or related backgrounds. So I think obviously one of the first things you can do is look for places with specialist teams, because that helps to differentiate you. But I think just more generally, getting internships or placements where you can always helps, especially if you're not from a finance background or economics or business background. Doing something to differentiate yourself as being, I've got this specialist chemistry or engineering background, but I also know how to do the finance things, is really helpful. So getting any experience you can in that, any courses you can go on, any people you can speak to in the industry, I think is also really helpful, because it's just such a specific industry that I think if you're not in it, you don't really understand all the nuances and what's going on. So talking to people where you can, things like this, I think are great, because it just opens up what's quite a mysterious industry, being investment banking and M&A, and people talk about it, but I think a lot of people don't really understand what happens. So I think sort of taking steps to expose yourself to the finance industry is always going to benefit you. Understanding just the simple sort of nuts and bolts of valuations and methodologies and is also really helpful. And just reading about deals, there's deals all the time going on, things that are in public domain, and just reading about them, understanding, looking at what's happening in the market is really useful, and it's going to differentiate you when you get through to those interviews and application processes to really make you stand out as someone that they're going to want to take on.
Well, thank you for all the answers that you have for us today, Laura. Really do appreciate taking out your time to speak to us today. And I really think that it will greatly benefit our chemistry and chemical engineering students. And hopefully they will consider maybe joining an M&A advisory boutique after this. So yeah, for our viewers, please do consider of subscribing and liking this video.